Let's take a tour of the club tax book. Click on an icon to open it up. Need to accept the licensing agreement that the club tax book is available to everybody within your organization, but should not be shared with other individuals. We're going to widen the screen so we can see things more properly. And let's open up the chapter 1, which is the law applicable to clubs. As you will see, you can see the actual law, the 501c7. You can see the actual wording. It's only one sentence of the Internal Revenue Code. We also provide the history. So in 1976, the law changed. The law used to say that it was operated exclusively. Now it is substantially all. So we give you the actual documentation of the law. If you happen to be a taxable club, you're subject to Code Section 277, so we give you the actual law there also. So in the law applicable to clubs, you can see that in Chapter 1. The focus of the book really is Chapter 2. That is the issues specific to clubs. Anything in red that we have just highlighted, you will note that this is what has been added in the last quarterly update. So there's an issue that was added. We're going to click on the advertising here for new members. You'll notice our writing style is we address a topic, then we address a question as if the club were asking the question themselves in plain English. Then we try to provide an answer to that question, again in a simple sentence, 2 sentences. So in no more than a quarter to a half a page, you have the topic, the question, and the answer. We also provide you with information on when you should take action upon this particular issue. So you should probably review the advertising rules annually. We do provide a reference. So one thing about the club tax book is I don't want to give an answer that there's not support for. Therefore, we provide the reference material as to where we found the answer. And in this particular case on advertising, I had written a letter to Mr. Stephen Miller, who was the current director of the Exempt Organization Division in Washington, D.C. So there's a letter that I have mailed to Steve. And then we have a letter that Steve has responded, or his office has responded to my question. And you will note that he summarized my question, which is the same question you saw back in the brief summary. Can a club advertise for new members? And then you will see his written response as that there is not a per se rule on advertising for participation. So we provide you the easy to read summary, but we provide you the documentation so that you or your club treasurer can read this if you want to agree that I have come to the proper conclusion. Let's move on down in the table of contents here on the left-hand side. You will see just stopping on 1, corporate members. Should a club have corporate members or not? You will see that we give you multiple documentation for the answer to the question. So again, I give you a simple question, simple answer, and then I document the answer. Let's move on down the table of contents. That this past quarter we have added some updated forms. So the updated form 990 is in the club tax book now. Moving on down the table of contents, one section I really like to read and provide to my readers is the IRS training material. You should know what the revenue agents are being told in their training. So we have there's the 2002, and then we have all the years from 78 forward. So we try to provide all documentation for anything that's ever been written about private clubs. Let's move on down to non-member income, a huge area that of non-compliance according to the Internal Revenue Service. We talk about the non-member limitations. There's the Revenue Procedure 7117. You can read that document. We even provide checklists on how to interpret that revenue procedure. Let's move on down. We have non-traditional business activities. Another huge area for C7s, and you'll see there's 3 documents that clubs really should read and understand dealing with non-traditional business activities. So I don't believe we have missed anything in the club tax book, but that's why we have quarterly updates so we can provide all the documentation of any question that has been asked. So if you want to know what the definition of de minimis is, we provide it. The newest chapter is Chapter 3, dealing with tipped versus service charge employees. As I'm doing this webinar at the end of 2013, huge area of compliance that a lot of clubs are not in compliance with. So there is a difference between a tip and a service charge, and I provide all of the documentation on how to interpret what is a tip and what is a service charge. One that I think is not used often enough that should be used by the marketing directors. I even have a chapter for the marketing directors, and this is written a little bit different than the issues in Chapter 2, in that I do not provide the documentation. I just provide the simple question and simple answer for the marketing director. I do not want to confuse them with the actual law, because most marketing directors say, I don't understand tax law. Well, you don't need to. Read the question, read the answer, and you have the information. All marketing directors should be spending a lot of time in here. The biggest issue, should we issue a Form 1099 to existing members for services rendered and bringing in a new member? I provide that question and I provide the answer. If you want the documentation, a person would go back up in Chapter 2 and read the documentation on these issues. So marketing directors should spend a lot of time in the club tax book. So it's not just for CPAs and attorneys, clearly. We have other chapters that are useful. We have a club treasurer's workbook and a handbook. So I think it's fun to read what the IRS has said. Another way to find and answer your question is up here in this section where we can type in a word. We're going to type in caddies. So we're going to see where that word shows up in the total document. You can see in the table of contents that we have 4 documents or 4 issues that have been addressed dealing with caddies. So we look further, there's another document later on under the D's, and then it moves to the actual documents themselves. So by typing in your keyword, you can search this whole document. If you want to move back, you go to the return to the previous page, click on that, and it takes us back to the table of contents again. Let's move up and close the items here on the left-hand side, and let's go to the table of contents. And the table of contents, we have a box that shows anything new that was inserted on the last quarter. So when you get an update, you can click that and find it, or you can go to the left-hand side and it's in red on the left-hand side. So 2 ways to find the most recent updates to the club tax book. With that said, that's how you move around the club tax book. I hope this has been helpful.